Simon says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
All right, everybody, welcome. I hope you're having a great evening, morning, wherever you're joining us from today. It's absolutely freezing in the UK today. I am absolutely cold as anything sitting here. So hopefully my hands don't freeze as we're going through this session today. Welcome to everybody who normally joins our webinars. If you're new today, then I will just very briefly introduce myself. So my name is Deborah Ashby and I'm an IT trainer specializing in Microsoft products. And I basically design, deliver and facilitate Microsoft courses both online and in the classroom. And I've been doing this for a very long time, and a large percentage of my time is spent running training on Excel. And I will say that one thing that I've definitely noticed over the last few years is the rise in popularity of analyzing data, extracting data, and presenting key metrics, highlighting pain points in a much more visual way than we ever have done before. So we present our data using charts, using color, so that we can really get across the story of our data. Now, if you are somebody who does that type of thing for a job, then you might be aware of a little application called Power BI. It's definitely the latest buzzword, the application that everybody who analyzes data is kind of using. If you've never heard of Power BI before, it might be because it does kind of live outside of the Microsoft 365 family. So it's not part of your Microsoft 365 subscription if you have one. It is a product that you have to pay for. And it's basically an application that allows you to create really nice looking reports and dashboards and visualizations. But as I said, Power BI is an additional cost. So a lot of people still prefer to create their dashboards in Excel. And there's a few reasons for that, not only the cost. Excel is a familiar application for most people. Most of us use Excel or have used Excel at some point or another. So a lot of people feel a lot more comfortable using Excel when they're first learning how to do dashboards. And for me personally, I find Excel a little bit more flexible than Power BI, particularly when it comes to dashboard design and getting my dashboard to kind of look exactly as I want it to look. So there are pros and cons to both. We're going to focus on dashboards in Excel today. And we're going to walk through the process of building a reasonably straightforward dashboard. And the only reason we're doing a simple dashboard is due to time constraints. I can't show you anything too complex with the time that we have here, but hopefully you're going to see enough that will give you an idea as to what a dashboard is, the potential that it has, and just really spark your interest and get you wanting to learn more about dashboards. So let's take a quick look at our agenda for today. So as I mentioned, we're going to go through a little bit about what exactly is a dashboard, why is it going to be useful, and the best way to illustrate that really is to just show you a completed dashboard example. So we're going to start straight off the bat by showing you a completed version. Please don't judge my design skills, that's all I'll say. We'll then run through some data preparation and organization tips. So this is just going to help you be a little bit more organized, because dashboards can get really complex and you might find yourself with lots and lots of different tabs. So we want to try and organize that as best as we can. I'm then going to go through creating a wireframe. Now, this isn't something that is essential, but it is a good idea to kind of have a plan as to what you want to go onto your dashboard before you even begin. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to jump into actually setting up or creating the information that we want to put on our dashboard. And the dashboard we're going to create today is pretty heavy on pivot tables and charts. So if you love pivot tables as much as I do, then you're probably going to really, really enjoy this. We're going to create 4 different pivot tables and 4 different pivot charts. We're going to create ourselves a line chart, a map chart, a bar chart, and a donut chart. I'm also going to show you how you can incorporate calculations using formulas onto your dashboard as well. So you can sort of really see the potential and the flexibility that you have when you're creating dashboards in Excel. We're then going to go through and we're going to bring it all together. We're going to assemble our dashboard, and then we're going to go through some basic formatting. That's a step that in the real world, formatting your dashboard is very important. You want it to look really nice, really modern, really slick. I don't have a great deal of time, so I'm not going to be making this look amazing. We're just going to be doing some basic formatting. I'm going to show you how you can add interactivity to your to your dashboard using slicers. And then the final thing I'm going to show you is how you can update everything on your dashboard with the click of one button. So that is pretty much all we're going to have time to go through today. So let's get started. Now, as I mentioned, let's talk about what exactly is a dashboard. So let me just switch to my completed example. So a dashboard is really just kind of a report that helps you display important data or information in a single place so that your audience can easily see key metrics or statistics that are important to them. And that's one thing that is really important. When you're designing dashboards, you need to think to yourself, what questions am I trying to answer with this dashboard? What do people want to know? What does my audience want to know? So we're going to build like a sales dashboard. And this is built off of downloaded sales data. So if I'm presenting these key metrics to maybe my team leader, what's of most interest to them? What do they want to know from this dashboard? And you can see here, this is a completed version of the dashboard that we're going to build today. I am going to change it very slightly because I really don't like the formatting on some of this. So we'll do it slightly different, but this is sort of roughly what we're going to do. And let's just run through it very quickly so you know exactly what you're looking at. So at the top here, we just have a title. And then you can see that we have these sort of key statistics running across the top in pink. So things like the most profitable item, the most profitable region, the number of cancelled orders, and the top sales channel as well. And all of these results underneath, where we have cosmetics, sub-Saharan Africa, so on and so forth, these are all linked back to our original data, so that when the data changes, these will also update accordingly. So I'm going to show you how you can build that type of thing into your dashboard. And then underneath that, we really just have 4 different pivot charts. And I built these in slightly different ways. You can have much more than that on a dashboard, not necessarily just pivot tables or pivot charts. You can do whatever you like on your dashboard. And one thing I would say is if you are sort of fairly new to dashboard design, it's always good to sort of go away and take a look at what other people are doing. And one source that I always go to if I'm thinking, how do I design this dashboard, or I'm trying to give myself some inspiration, I always jump onto sites like Pinterest. So if we go to Pinterest, I've got it open over here, and just type in Excel dashboard design, you can see that you're just going to get tons of these come up, which can give you a really good idea as to how you might want to structure your dashboard. So you can see here we have just an example of a financial dashboard that someone's created. We've got the KPIs listed down the side, and then we have a whole bunch of charts showing different important key metrics. So it's always worth having a look through sites like Pinterest just to give yourself some inspiration. So saying all of that, what else do we need to be aware of on here? Well, as I said, all of this is built from one data set. And that data set is this tab down here, sales data. Now, this is just a data set that I've downloaded from online. And it's just pure sales data. We have regions, countries, we have the item type that's being sold, the sales channel, whether it's offline or online, priority, and then we have some dates and we have some values. So things like units sold, total revenue, total profit, so on and so forth. So this is a really good meaty data set. We have about 5,000 rows of data. So if I jump to the bottom, control down arrow, first little shortcut key just there, you can see 5001. If we account for the heading, that's 5,000 rows of data. So this is a fairly sizable data set that we're going to use to build this dashboard. Now, one thing that you should be aware of, first of all, is that I've already sort of skipped ahead a little bit because this data set is already nice and tidy. It's nice and consistent. And a lot of the time, depending on where you're getting your data from, you might be downloading it from a third-party system, maybe you're bringing it in from a website. Data doesn't always come across in the perfect format. So we might have to go through and utilize Excel functions to clean it up a little bit. Now, I'm not going to go through any of the cleaning data stuff in this particular session because we did do the webinar on cleaning data, I think either last month or the month before. So if you want to know some of those cleaning data techniques, you can always go back on the Simon Says It website and take a look at that webinar. So our data is already clean. It's already ready for us to analyze. And I've already put it in a table. And this is a really important point. If you want your dashboard to update with the click of one button, you want to make sure that you put your source data in a table. Now, mine's already in a table. How do I know that? Well, I can see that if I take a look at my ribbons, I can see the table design ribbon. So that tells me that my data is in a table. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be able to see that ribbon. So make sure that your data is in a table. If you're not sure how to do that, you can simply click somewhere in your data and press Control T on your keyboard. Mine won't do it because it's already in a table. Control T is the keyboard shortcut to put it into a table. Now, another thing that's really important when you're working with things like this is to make sure that you name your table. And this brings me on to my first sort of talking point, really, which is about standardizing your naming conventions when you're working in Excel. And this really just ties into being a lot more organized than you might normally be. For example, I'm clicked in my table of data. If I take a look up on that table design ribbon, can you see the first group where we have properties? I have table name, and then I've named my table TBL_sales_data. So just by looking at this table name, I know that it's a table because it says TBL, and I know it's related to sales data. And you'll see that whenever I name a table in Excel, I always start with TBL so that I know that it's a table. If I have a chart, I might name the chart CHT and then a name. If it's a pivot table, I might name it PVT and then the name. Now, the reason why it's so important to have like a standard naming convention so it's easy to identify the different elements in your dashboard is because it's going to make your life a lot easier when we start having to link our tables and our charts to things like slices. It's going to be easier for you to identify them. So it's good to get into the habit of naming everything correctly as we start to go through. Now, what else do I want to highlight before we actually get into building our dashboard? We're going to talk about wireframes in a moment. So yes, let's talk about that now. I've got a tab at the bottom called wireframe. Now, this might look a little bit strange, but bear with me on this one. Because you have to think to yourself, okay, how am I going to design my dashboard? So before you even begin, you want to make sure that you make a note of exactly what you want to display on that dashboard. Maybe I want to see the average gross sales by country. Maybe I want to see how much profit we've made each month. Maybe I want to see our sales broken down by products so that we can see which are the best performing products and which are the worst, which is going to allow us to make informed decisions when it comes to which products we're selling next year. So sit down and think about the metrics that you actually want to display on the dashboard first of all. Once you have that, start to think about how you want to lay out your dashboard. Where do you want things to go? Where do you want your charts to go? Where do you want your slices to go? Which parts do you want formatted? Things like that. Now, you can do this very quickly just by doing it on a piece of paper. I tend to like to do it in a tab in Excel like I've done here. So I've just used shapes to basically sketch out a plan of how my dashboard is going to look when I start to add my charts and other things in. So I've got my header at the top. I'm going to have some summary statistics at the top. I'm going to have my slices next, and then I've got different spaces for the different charts that we're going to use. So think about that when you're designing your dashboard, or think about it before you start to design it so that you can design it in the best way possible. Okay, so we call that a wireframe. It's really just planning out how your dashboard is going to look. Another thing that you might want to think about when we are starting to think about our dashboard is the use of color in your dashboard. Now, again, as I said, don't judge me on my design just here. I'm not saying that this is a great design or anything. It's something I whipped up very quickly. I'm sure you can put together something that looks a lot nicer than this. But also make sure that if you work for a company who maybe has branded colors, make sure that you're using your theme colors in your dashboard so that everything ties into your company branding. And again, you might have those set up automatically by your IT team when you open up Excel at your workplace, or you might have to create your own themes in Excel. Those are outside of the scope of today's session, but it's just something else to be aware of, the use of color in your spreadsheets. Now, just on that same topic, also notice the way that I've used color to kind of separate different groups of things in this workbook. So if you look at the bottom, if you look at my tabs, can you see that the first two tabs there are colored in this dark pink? So this is basically my data tabs. So I have my sales data on this tab, and then I have some extra data on the next tab. I've then got my wireframe, that's a different color. And then I have these other tabs that are all in blue because they're all kind of the same thing. Each one of these tabs has on it one of the charts that I've used on the dashboard. So I can see all of those on individual worksheets. We then have our calculations tab. I'm going to talk you through this in a moment. And then finally, we have our dashboard. So I've separated everything out and I've used color to make it easier and easier for me to organize all of these different tabs that I have, because this is a very straightforward dashboard. If it's a lot more complicated, you're going to have way more tabs than I do here. Okay, so all of these things you need to be aware of. So do I want to mention anything else? Let's actually, no, I'll talk about calculations when we get to that. Now, I'm just going to close down this file because this was just the completed version. So let's close that down. And I'm just going to reopen the one that I sent you guys. So just bear with me 1 second. And I think I sent you the workbook, didn't I? Yeah. All right. So this file looks slightly different to the one that we were just looking at. I've still got my sales data in a table on the first tab. I've got some extra data, which we're going to use a bit later on. I've got my wireframe just there. I have my calculations and I have my dashboard, which at the moment looks pretty bare. Now, we're going to build up this dashboard. I've already started doing it, again, just to save a bit of time. All I've done here for this heading is I've basically just resized this row by dragging it down, and I've just applied some formatting to the cell. So that's all I've done, and then I've added the text. Now, one thing I would say is that when you're putting together a dashboard, you want it to kind of look as clean and professional as possible. So I always come in here and turn off the grid lines just so I'm starting from a blank canvas and all of my charts look really nice and we don't have these grid lines showing in the background. So let's jump up to the View tab, and I'm going to, in the Show group where we have grid lines, I'm going to deselect, and that's just going to get rid of all of those grid lines and give me a nice blank canvas. So let's start by doing a couple of design changes here, because what I'm going to have is I've got this title at the top, and underneath that, I'm going to have an area where I have my slices. Now, if you're not sure what slices are, they're basically just filters. They're interactive filters you can use to filter your data. And I'm going to have some of these at the top of the page. So I'm going to grab row 2. You can see I've got that double-headed arrow. And I'm just going to drag it down to allow some room for my slices. So slices aren't that big. I think that should be fine. And just so this stands out, I'm going to change the background fill just to a light grey colour. So this is where I'm going to have my slices. Now, underneath that, I'm going to have some top-level or high-level key metrics that people are interested in. So we're going to add those in at the end. In fact, yeah, we're not going to do those just yet. We're just going to leave our dashboard as it is. Because what we need to do is we need to start constructing our pivot tables and our pivot charts that we want to go on this dashboard. So let's go back to our sales data, and we're going to create our first pivot table and pivot chart. And we're going to create a line chart, which is going to show us the total profit by year. So I'm going to make sure that I'm clicked in my data. we're going to jump up to the Insert ribbon, and the first button here is Pivot Table. So let's click that. I'm going to be creating my pivot table based off of my table range, and you can see here it's automatically selected it for me, which is perfect. And I'm going to put it on a new worksheet. Now, I would say when you're doing a dashboard, if you've got lots of different pivot tables and pivot charts, you want to make sure you put each one on a new worksheet so that it doesn't get confused with your source data or anything else that you have going on. So I'm going to say, put it on a new worksheet, click on OK. And there we go. I have a new sheet at the bottom, sheet 1, and I'm just going to drag and I'm going to move this to just before where we have dashboard. So now I have a blank pivot table report, which I need to populate with fields. And before I do that, I'm going to make sure that I name everything on here so that I'm being consistent. So the first thing we're going to rename is the worksheet. So currently it just says sheet 1. Let's right click and go to rename. And this is going to be a line chart. So I'm just going to say, this is the pivot table. So PVT underscore, I'm going to call it line chart. I'm also going to make sure that I'm clicked in this blank pivot table report. And if you notice just above where we have pivot table name, it still has the generic name of pivot table 1. So I'm going to name this PVT underscore line underscore chart. Perfect. So what is our first pivot chart going to display? Well, it's going to display the profits by year. So if we cast our eyes over to the right-hand side, we have our pivot table fields. Now, if you're not that familiar with pivot tables, they are really straightforward. What you see here in this pivot table fields area are basically all of the column headings from our source data. So we've got region, country, item type, sales channel, so on and so forth. And we build up our pivot table simply by dragging and dropping any one of these fields into one of these 4 areas down here. And depending on where we drag them, our report is going to display in a different way. So I'm doing a line chart, profit by year. I'm going to I'm going to find total profit. Where is it? There it is. I'm going to drag it down into values. And in the rows, I'm going to go for, let's go for order date. I'm going to drop that down into rows. So you can now see what I have in my pivot table. It's showing me the years, 2015 to 2022, which is what my data set spans, and then the sum of total profit. Now, at the moment, it doesn't look great. It's not really organized as I want it to be, because what happened, if you notice in our pivot table fields, when I dropped in order date, Excel automatically split up my date for me. So it recognized that we have years, we have quarters, and we have the order date. So if I expand 2015, you can see I can break this down into quarters and then the months. So Excel did that automatically for me. Now, in this particular scenario, I only want to see the years. I'm not interested in quarters or anything else. So what I can do is go down to rows, and I'm going to drag quarters out and also order date just to leave the years. I'm probably going to want to apply a little bit of number formatting to this total profit column as well, because it looks kind of messy. So once again, we can just click in this column, right click, and go to number format. And this is the total profit. I'm going to give it accounting format. I'm going to take those decimal places down to 0 and click on OK. So that looks a little bit tidier. So that is our first pivot table. Now from this pivot table, I want to create a line chart. Now, what do I want to include in my line chart? Well, pretty much all of this information, but I don't want to include the grand total. That's not going to make sense. So I'm going to turn off the grand total for this particular pivot table. So once again, I need to make sure I'm clicked inside the pivot table. We're going to go up to the Design tab, into the Layout group, Grand Totals, and we're going to say Off for rows and columns. So now I just have the data that I want to include in that line chart. So once we have our pivot table, we can go to Pivot Table Analyze, Pivot Chart, and then we can choose our chart type. Now, I will say when you're creating charts, not all charts are created equally. Some charts are more suited to certain types of data. But I would say that column charts in general are suitable for most types of data. But if you have time-based data like we do here, 2015 to 2022, that's often nicely represented in the form of a line chart. And I want my line chart to have markers. So I'm going to choose line with markers, that option just above, just to give myself those little markers on the year points. Let's click on OK, and we have ourselves a pivot chart. Now, there's a lot of formatting we could do here to make this look really fancy. As I said, we don't have a great deal of time to go through formatting, but I am going to do a few different things with this. Now, the first thing that I always do in general when I'm working with pivot charts, because I want them to look as clean as possible. I don't want them to be too fussy. So I'm going to remove these grey filter buttons, because if I want to filter the charts on my dashboard, I'm going to use a slicer, or I could come here and use the pivot table. So I'm going to right click on the grey buttons and I'm going to say hide all field buttons on chart, just to get rid of those. What else can I get rid of? Well, let's take a look at this total, the legend over here. That's not really showing me any information. So I'm going to get rid of this. And the thing is, with things like the legend, they are simply text boxes. So I can just select it and press the delete key just to get rid of that legend. I might want to add a little title. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about these chart titles because I'm actually going to give them all different chart titles when we put them on the dashboard. But just so I remember what this chart represents, this is the, let's say, total profit by year. That'll do for now. And of course, I could do other types of formatting. So currently those markers don't really stand out too much. So maybe I want to change the color scheme that I'm using in here. So I can go up to the Design tab and I'm going to go to Change Colors, and let's make this a purple color. And if I wanted to change the chart style, I could maybe choose something from up here. I've got all different kinds of choices. So let's go for that one. That looks quite nice. And I think I'm going to leave it like that. Now, currently, take a look at this line. And we can see very clearly that there was a massive dip in profits in 2017. So this is why visualizing our data in this type of way is really useful, because maybe if I'm the salesperson, I might want to investigate a little bit further as to why we had such a large dip in sales in that year in particular. Now, if you wanted to, for example, I've got a lot of space in between that point and all of this down here. I've got this big old blank space. If I wanted to make this line a little bit more centered on this particular chart, I could change the way that this axis looks. Now, if I right click on the axes and go to Format Axes, this is where I could change things like the bounds. So you can see here where it says minimum, it starts at 0. So if I didn't want this line to appear so high up in that plot area, I could maybe change this to something like 100. Is it 100,000 or it's 100 million? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I click away, you can see that that's going to pull it down, and it just looks a little bit nicer on the actual chart. So you can change things like that as you go through. So that is my first chart, profit by year. Let's move on to a slightly more interesting chart. Now, if you are building lots of pivot charts to put on a dashboard, one thing we want to be making sure that we're doing this as efficiently as possible. So in general, what I do is I will copy the worksheet, delete out the chart, and then just change the pivot table. I find that's quicker than having to go back to the sales data and create a brand new pivot chart from there. So a quick way to copy this particular worksheet that we're on is to hold down the Control key, click, and just drag off to the side. When you let go, you're going to get an exact copy. So I'm going to right click and let's rename this, because the next one we're doing is we're doing a pivot table, and this is going to be a map. For now, I can simply just delete out that chart and then rearrange my pivot table fields, because I want to display a different metric in this chart. So this time I want to see the average units sold by country. So I don't need years in rows. I don't need the total profit in values. What I want instead is units sold down here. And I want this by country. So let's grab the country field and drop that into rows. Now we have a lot of information here. There's a lot of countries in there. Now, because of the type of chart that we're doing, that's absolutely fine. We're doing a map chart, which basically just colorizes the country on a map. I wouldn't have this much data if I was doing something like a column chart, because can you imagine the axes with this? It would be absolutely horrendous and nobody would be able to read it. So that is what I mean by not every chart is suitable for the data that you want to represent. So we're doing a map chart, so this is absolutely fine to leave this in a big long list. But what else do I want to do here? Right, notice that it's showing the sum of the units sold, whereas I want it to display the average units sold by country. So how can I change this from doing a sum to doing an average? Well, there's a few different ways, but we can go down to our values area in our pivot table fields, click the little drop down arrow and go to value field settings. So this is where we can choose how this field is summarized. So currently it's doing a sum. I want it to do an average. Let's click on OK. And now it's showing me the average of the units sold. Once again, I want to apply some number formatting. Right click, number format. And these are just numbers. It's just the number of units sold. It's not currency. So we're going to take the decimal places down and click on OK. And now I have my average units sold by country. Once again, I'm going to go up to Pivot Table Analyze and I'm going to name this table. Because we copied the sheet, notice it's still called PVT line chart, but we want this to be called PVT map. Oops, map chart. So now that we have this data, I want to represent it in a map chart. But there is one issue that you're going to come across. So let's take a look at it. Let's go to Pivot Table Analyze, Pivot Chart, and one of the chart types in here is map. Now notice what I get. I get a little message. You can't create this chart type with data inside a pivot table. And that's really important. If you want to use pivot table data in a map chart, you have to pull it out of the pivot table first of all, which is a little bit of a pain. Fortunately, it is quite simple. All we need to do is click somewhere in the data, Control A to select everything, Control C to copy, and I'm just going to paste it over here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just paste the values only. So up on the home ribbon, click the lower half of the paste button, and we're going to say paste values. So that gives me all of the data, but it's not in a pivot table anymore. So what I can then do with this selected is create just a regular map chart. So this time we're going to insert into maps and filled map. And depending on how much data you've got, this can take a couple of seconds for it to pull through everything, but that is what we get. So you can see here that the countries are kind of shaded in a gradient fill depending on the number of units sold. So the darker the fill, the higher the number of units sold. And this is quite a nice way of representing geographical data. Now, the problem that we have here, because we've now created this chart based off of data that isn't in a pivot table, if this data was to update, the chart isn't going to change. So once we've created the chart, we then need to point it back to the pivot table data. So with it selected, we're going to go up to the chart design ribbon, select data. I'm going to delete out the data range that we're using. And I'm just going to go back and select columns A and B. So it's now going to use the pivot table data again. So it's a bit of a pain. You can't create it from pivot data, but you can point it back to use that data. Once we've done that, I can then go in and delete out everything that we have in here. So a little bit of a workaround there to get your map charts to work based off of your pivot data. So once again, let's do a little bit of formatting. There isn't a great deal that we can do with map charts, but if we go up to the chart design tab, I'm going to choose a different chart style. Let's go for something like that. Looks a little bit nicer. I'm also going to change the colors. We've got a purple theme going on. Let's make it purple. And just so I remember, I'm going to name this. This is the average units Oops, I can't type tonight. My hands are so cold. My country. There we go. So there is chart number 2, which we're going to put on our dashboard. How are we doing for time, guys? Oh, not too bad. I thought I would be later than that. Let's do our third chart, which is going to be a bar chart. Oh, before we do that, I want to make sure that I name my pivot chart. Oh no, we can't name this one because, sorry, ignore what I just said there. We're going to go on to creating our third chart. So once again, I'm going to grab the tab and I'm going to make a copy. Now this map chart, because it's using so much data, this can be a little bit slow. So I'm going to copy the line chart again. So let's hold down Control, drag and drop it where we want it to be so that we get our copy. I'm going to right click, I'm going to rename, and we're going to call this one, what are we calling this one? Pivot, so PVT underscore bar underscore chart. Let's delete out the charts and let's take a look at the data that we're displaying. So in this one, I want to show the revenue by sales channel. So once again, I'm going to remove years from rows and total profit. And we want revenue by sales channel. So let's drag the sales channel down into rows. And we want the total revenue, which is just here. So again, a really nice, straightforward little table. Is this the one that I want for the bar charts? Sorry, I want to display this as sales channel and item type. So we're going to combine item type with the sales channel. We're going to drop that into rows as well. So I can see all of the offline sales for all of the different items or different categories and all of the online sales as well. Now, again, this is quite a lot of information to display in a bar chart. If I was to go to Pivot Table Analyze and click on Pivot Chart and choose Bar, you can sort of see what that's going to look like. It's not even showing me all of the items, the different categories. I'd have to make this a really tall table in order to see all of those. So if you do have a lot of data and you're trying to cram it into a certain chart type, one little thing I would say to do is maybe start applying a filter to just show the top 3 or the top 5. That can be a lot better than trying to show absolutely everything. So that's what we're going to do with this data to display just the top 3 as opposed to all of the different categories, the different items. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and change the number formatting. So this is the total revenue. I'm going to go for accounting, take the decimal places down to 0 and click on OK. And I'm just going to display the top 3 items. So if you want to apply a filter, we can right click, go to filter, and we have a top 10 filter in here. So the name of this filter is a little bit deceiving because you don't have to display 10, you can display as many as you like. So my management team are only interested in the top 3 categories of products, the total revenue for those particular categories. So let's go for 3. Click on OK, and now you can see I have a much smaller data set which I can comfortably manage in a bar chart. So don't forget about things like that. You can refine your data before putting it into a table, into a chart. So let's go up to Pivot Chart and we're going to choose Bar Chart again. Click on OK. And that looks a lot better. We need to do some tidying up here. Let's right click and hide all field buttons to get rid of those gray buttons. The total isn't doing a great deal for me again, so let's just get rid of the legend. Let's delete that out. And what I'm going to do here is instead of having the values in the horizontal axes underneath, I'm going to add these as data labels on the actual bars. I think that looks a lot more effective sometimes, and it also takes up less room. So I'm going to click on my bars, and I'm going to make these bars a little bit wider. Let's right click, Format Data Series. And notice here, I can change the gap width between these bars. So if I drag this down, it's going to make those bars essentially a lot thicker than they currently are. So you can make these as wide or as narrow as you want. So I quite like that look. I think they look better, a little bit thicker. What else do I want to do here? Let's go to formatting. Actually, let's format the data series. Well, that's the same place I was in. If I go to fill, I can change the colors of these bars as well. But if I choose vary colors by point, it's going to recolor them all for me based on the theme that I have in use in Excel. And each bar is going to be a different color. So that looks quite nice. I think I'm going to leave it like that. Now, to add the data labels, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete this horizontal axis, like so. Looks a lot cleaner as soon as we do that. I'm going to click on my bars, and you can either use the plus just here, or you can right click and you can add data labels from the right click menu. And if we add data labels, we can then choose to display them on the inside end. And for me, that sometimes looks a lot nicer than having them on the horizontal axes or on the outside. If I select the first one, I can apply formatting. So let's go to the Home tab. I'm going to change these to, let's make them white, and I'm going to make them bold. And I think those look quite nice. If you wanted to do something like make these bars really stand out, you could choose to add a border around the outside. Again, just make sure that you select them. And when you select one, it will select all. And then we can go up to the Format tab and we can apply a shape outline. So maybe I just want to do a grey outline just to make those stand out from the background. Another thing I'm going to do is delete the grid lines. So just click on one, it will select them all, press delete. The last thing to do here is simply to add a chart title. As I said, we are going to replace these, but just so I can remember what they are, this is the, I'm just going to say revenue by item and sales channel, like so. And there is our third chart. The final chart we're going to do is just a very quick little donut chart. It's the pie chart's favorite cousin. So I'm going to copy the worksheet once again, hold down Control, drag and drop. Same old process. Let's right click, let's rename. This is going to be pivot underscore donut. Always makes me hungry when I'm doing a donut chart. Let's delete out the chart. Let's click in our pivot table and we're going to remove the rows, both of those, and the values. And in our donut chart, we're going to just show the count of orders, and we're going to do this by, should we do this by region? Yeah, let's do it by region. So let's drag region into rows. And I'm going to add, we're doing a count of the actual orders. So for this, I can use the order ID because every time there's an order, it gets assigned a unique order ID. So I can drag this down to values. Once again, by default, Excel is going to try and sum together all of the order numbers. We want it to do a count as opposed to a sum. We want it to count the orders. So we can jump into value field settings and choose count, like so. Now, once again, I only have a few different regions just here. So let's see how that looks in a donut chart, because the thing, pie charts and donut charts in general are not my favorite types of chart. They're quite limited with how much data you can actually display in them. And I find that pie charts and donut charts are generally good for when you have maybe 2 or 3 things that you want to kind of represent in that chart. Any more than that, and it starts to get a little bit confusing. And there are other chart types that are much better at displaying that data. So let's have a quick look. We might have to apply a filter or do something. I'm not sure. Let's see. Pivot charts. Now you'll find your donut chart underneath the pie category. And it's this one at the end here. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad actually. Let's leave that as it is. Let's go OK. There is our donut chart. Let's do some tidying. We're going to right click, hide all fill buttons on the chart. The legend is a bit untidy, but it can't be helped. So I'm going to leave that there. What I am going to do is I'm going to apply a little bit of formatting to this donut. This hole in the middle of the donut is way too big. So let's select it, right click, format data series, and we can change the donut hole size. So I'm going to drag this down, and you can make this as big or as small as you want. And what I see a lot of people do if they have something like this is they might add something like an icon in the middle there just to give it a little bit more visual interest. One thing I am going to do with this is I am going to add data labels so that we can see the actual number of orders per segment. So once again, we can click on the plus, we can go to data labels, and yep, there we go. let's make this a little bit bigger. I'm just going to drag it out. And as I said, you might want to fiddle around with this a little bit more. I'm going to make those, should I make them white? Yep, why not? And bold, just to display. All right, let's give it an old name. So this one is, I'm going to call this number of orders by region. And there we go. There is our fourth chart. Now, I've forgotten to name a lot of these. As I said, it's always going to work out better if you make sure that you name things as you go through. I haven't. We are limited for time. So just pretend that I did that for all of them. Because what we need to do now is we can start moving these across to our dashboard and arranging them as we want. Now, let's go to the dashboard, because what I want is, before I have these charts, I want to have some what we call cards at the top, just showing some key metrics. Now, where are my key metrics going to come from? Well, they're going to come from my calculations worksheet. So if we go over here, I've already done this because I knew we wouldn't have enough time in an hour to go through exactly how I've calculated all of this. But just understand, in column A, I have the key metrics that I want to display at the top of my dashboard. So these are really the things that in one glance you can just see exactly what you're looking for. So maybe my manager wants to know straight away what the most profitable item is, what the most profitable region is. Maybe he wants to see the count of cancelled orders, how many people have cancelled. And maybe he wants to see the top sales channel. Is it online or offline? So this information isn't going to be represented in any form of chart. It's just going to be there at the top. But we want to construct it so that if our data changes, the original source data, and maybe the top sales channel changes, we want to make sure that it also changes on the dashboard. So we need to start performing some calculations on a different worksheet and then linking them through to our dashboard. So I've already done them, but just so you understand what you're looking at and the type of thing that you can do. And this is where dashboards can start to get really complex when you start to have lots and lots of different calculations. So let's start with the most profitable item or category. You can see here this little table and the one underneath. So basically, in order to find out what the most profitable item is, and I can see it at the bottom here, it's cosmetics, what I've had to do is a couple of different calculations. Now, if you take a look in the formula bar, you can see I've used the unique formula, which will give me a unique list of values from whatever column I've selected. So it's basically looking at my sales data spreadsheet at the item type column, and it's pulling back all of the unique entries. So if you go to sales data and look at item type, you'll see we have baby food and, all these different ones are repeated throughout this column. We just want a unique list of each one. So that is where the unique function is really good. So I just have a long list of those, and I want to find out the total profit for each of these item types. So once again, if you take a look in the formula bar, I've done a sum if calculation. And sum if is one of my favorite formulas. It basically allows you to sum together values based off of a condition. So this sum if has basically said, look at the sales data worksheet and add together the profit whenever the item type is baby food, snacks, beverages, so on and so forth. So it's summing with a condition. So now that I have all of that, I can work out what the maximum value is, because I'm looking for the most profitable item out of all of these. So at the bottom here, I've done a max calculation on this data above. So we're looking for the maximum value in the cell range C5 to C16. And that is that value just there. And I've worked out which item that this value corresponds to using a lookup. So I've used index and match to look in this table for the maximum value and return what item type it relates to, which is cosmetics. So I've done a few different calculations there to get kind of where I need to be. But because of the way I've constructed this and everything links back to that source data, if anything changes, it's going to feed through to my calculations worksheet, which is in turn going to feed through to my dashboard. So everything is always going to be kept up to date. Now, I don't want to linger too much on this, but I've done a similar thing to find the most profitable region. I've created a unique list of the regions. I've done a sum-if calculation to find the total profit by region. I've found the maximum value, and I've done a lookup to find out what the region is that relates to that maximum value. So exactly the same to find out the key metric for this second one. The count of cancelled orders, well, that was fairly straightforward. All I had to do was a count if. I just want to count the orders column where it says cancelled. So that is how I've got to that value. We then have the top sales channel. So just here, again, I haven't bothered doing a unique because there's only 2 of them. I've just typed online and offline. We've done a count if this time because I want to count the orders. I've done a max, and then we've done a lookup again. So very similar, it's just using count if as opposed to sum if. So hopefully this gives you an idea as to the types of things you can do, lots of weird and wonderful calculations and then have it all feed through to your dashboard. So with all of that in mind, what I can now do is go back to my dashboard and start pulling everything together. And we've got about 10 minutes left, so we should be able to do this. So let's start out with those calculations. How do I want those to look? So again, you can spend a lot more time doing this than I am, but I'm just going to add some basic shapes. This is where the dashboard design comes in, and I am not the most design orientated person, but let's just do something. Let's add a little square, rectangle. I'm going to make this, let's make it a dark pink color. I'm going to say no outline. And I'm going to add a title to this. So this one is going to be the most profitable item. So let's right click, edit text, and I'm just going to make this caps. We'll just say most profitable item. And we're going to center it. This is just basic formatting skills. We'll center it in the middle, horizontally and vertically. I'm going to make it a different font. Let's make it stand out a bit. And I'm going to make that a little bit bigger, size 14. So I like to apply all my formatting to the first one, and then I'm just going to duplicate it 3 more times. Control D, Control D, Control D. I'm going to roughly drag these into position. So I'll put them along there. These don't have to be perfect. You just sort of have to get them into some kind of order, because then what we can do is select them all, holding down the shift, and we can use our alignment tools to put them exactly in the correct position. So with all of these selected, if we go to shape format, into align, I'm going to align them to the top, and I'm going to say distribute horizontally, and that's going to make those look perfect. Now with all of these still selected, I'm going to press Control D again to duplicate all of them, and I'm going to drag these directly underneath the other ones, like so. And I'm going to make these a slightly different color. So let's go for a lighter pink for those. As I said, you can spend more time doing this, but what we want under here is this is where we want to actually display that key metric that we've got on the calculations tab. So how do we get that to pull through? Well, we need to make sure that we're clicked within the shape, but then we immediately want to go up to the formula bar and type equals. We can then jump across to our calculations worksheet, and our most profitable item, we just need to link to that cell. So that's right at the bottom where we have cosmetics. Let's click that cell and press enter, and it's going to pull it straight through to the dashboard. Now I'm going to apply my formatting at the end. Let's do the next one. Let's type, I always do that. You don't type equals in the shape. You have to do it in the formula bar for this to work. So equals. Go back to our calculations. We then want the most profitable region. Press enter. Same thing for the rest of these. So let's delete out what we have in there. Click in the formula bar, equals. And we want, what do we want for this one? Is this cancelled orders? I think so. Oh, I need to change those headings, don't I? That would be helpful. Let's delete out the last one. Click, equals. Let's go back to calculations, and the last calculation that we want is the sales channel, and hit enter. So now I need to go in and change these headings. So this is most profitable region. So let's just change, oops. This is the number of cancelled orders. And this one is top sales channel, like so. So now that I have those linked through, I'm going to apply my formatting. So once again, I want to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to make it bold, and let's change the font to a darker pink. Now I do this at the end because then I can just use Format Painter to do it for the rest of them. So with this one selected, this first one, if we click on Format Painter twice, that's going to allow us to just select the other ones. Press the Escape to come out of Format Painter. So now this is completely dynamic. If anything changes in the source data, these key metrics at the top are also going to change. What we can then do is just bring across our charts that we created. So let's go back to our first line chart. Let's Control C, go back to the dashboard, Control V, and then we can move it into place. I'm just going to put that there. We then want our map chart, Control C. This one, because it's got a lot of data, it can be a little laggy, as you can see, but it does come through eventually. That's perfect. I'm going to position that somewhere around there. And you can drag these around and make them look a little bit nicer if you want. I'm going to just make these all nice and even. So let's drag them there. The next one is a bar chart. Control C, back to the dashboard. Control V, and place that one underneath. And I'm going to drag it across. And then finally we have the donut chart, which I kind of think looks a little bit messy, but this is why I don't like pie and donut charts. I'm not a fan, if you can't tell. And then we can drag that so that everything's all nice and even. Now, one thing that I would also probably do is remove the borders off of these charts as well, because I just want to make everything look as if it's part of this dashboard. And you can't do this all in one go. You have to do them all individually. So select the first chart. We want to go up to Format and just change the shape outline to no outline. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for all of these so that they really look like they're all sort of melded into one dashboard and they're part of this dashboard. So let's just do the last one and click on no outline. There we go. I'm sure you can make yours look a lot nicer than mine. Now, the thing with these headings, they're all very inconsistent. And this is why I said it doesn't really matter, because what in general I do if I'm constructing a dashboard is I add my own headings so that I can format them individually. And again, I would just do that using something like shapes. So maybe I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to drag this along like that. And let's make it, I'm going to make this a blue color with no outline. And I'm going to add some text into this, and that is going to be the title. So I'm going to say, oops, total profit by year. And then I can change the formatting if I want, make all of the font consistent, make it a bit bigger if I want to, and then I would probably delete out the heading in the chart because it just makes the chart look a lot cleaner. And I would add one of these, so I'd duplicate this, and I would add one for each of my charts. It just, again, just adds to giving it a nice consistent looking feel. Now, I'm not going to do it because we are running out of time. Hopefully you get the idea as to how that would look if we do it for all of these. Now, the final couple of things, we've got 2 minutes left. I'm going to try and get to the end. I just want to show you how to add some slices. So I left a little gap at the top here, this little gray area, where we can add in some interactive slices. And slices just act as filters, which we can click on, and it changes what's displayed on our dashboard. So you can add slices by clicking on any one of these charts. And if you right click, you have in here, they renamed it recently. If I go to, just bear with me because I know they renamed these. They're not going to let me do that. No, it's not going to let me do it. They've renamed the button. It used to be called Report Connections, and now it's called Filter Connections, but it's not letting me do it from the dashboard. So I'm going to go to the actual chart. Is it going to let me do it from here? No. Sorry, hang on. Let's go up. I'm getting confused here. You don't need to do report connections. Sorry. Let's click on this first chart. I need to insert the slicer before I try and connect it. Duh. Pivot chart analyze, insert slicer. Now, these slicers are going to be presented. Again, you're going to get all of the column headings in your data, and you can choose whatever you want to filter or slice your data up with. So maybe I want to add a slicer for the sales channel and the order priority. Let's click on OK. And these act as little filters, and we can customize these and make them look as if they're part of our dashboard. Now, we are running out of time, but I will just quickly show you a little bit of this. I'm going to click on the slicer up to the slicer ribbon at the top. Notice we have a contextual ribbon, and I'm going to change the columns from 1 to 2 so that those two slicers are on the same row. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to remove the heading to make this look a bit cleaner. Let's right click and go down to slicer settings, because in here we can deselect display header, click on OK, and that looks just a little bit nicer. What we can also do is we can change that background fill so that it blends into that grey background. Now for this, we need to effectively duplicate the style that this slicer is using. And if you take a look above where we have slicer styles, you can see the one selected is the one that's in use, this kind of greeny color. So what I can do is right click and say duplicate, and then I can modify. So I'm going to call this just my initials, slicer style. And the only thing I want to do with fill. So if I go to, I think it's whole slicer, go to format, and from here we can remove the background fill. And that says no color, doesn't it? Just bear with me 1 second. I'm just confused because it already says it's got no color, but it's quite clearly got a white background fill just there. Which one am I going to need to select? Is it that one? No, one of these, which you format, will remove that white background fill. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because, again, you can fiddle around with this and get these to look as you want, but you can remove that background fill from within your slicer styles. I'm just not sure which one of these controls that one. And then you can make these look as if they're part of that grey background and click on them to filter the different charts below. So these act as I said, a little filter, which just let you see your charts displayed in different ways. And I would do the same with this one. If we go to slicer, I would display this on one row. So I want to increase those columns. I would drag this across, and I would have these sitting at the top here, which just serve as a really nice way for people who maybe aren't used to using Excel. It's sort of fairly obvious that you can click on these buttons to kind of extract the information that you're interested in. So I will leave these just because we're under heavy time constraints at the moment to have a play around with these, but just know that you can format them by modifying the slicer style. You can remove this white background and make it look a lot neater than I have done here. Now, the final thing to note here is with these slicers, they will not be connected to all of your charts. So if I click on something online in this slicer, can you see that it did change that total profit by year chart? You can see what's going on down here. Now, if I wanted to control the other charts, we need to connect our slicers to our other charts. And this is what I was getting confused about earlier. We need to right click on the slicer and report connections. This will tell us which charts our slicer is currently controlling. And this is why it's important to make sure that you name your charts correctly. So you can see here, sheet, I've got pivot bar chart, pivot donut, pivot line. Because I didn't name the actual chart, you can see here it says pivot line, pivot. So it's all a bit of a mess over here. So this is why it's important to name them correctly. But I can tell by the sheet which one. So I basically want the slicers to control all of the charts on my dashboard. So I'm going to basically select all of them for this. And now if I select various different things, it's going to change in all of the charts. So you can see that that map chart is now updating. So you're going to find that you need to do that for all of your slices. Check the report connections and connect them to whichever charts you want them to control. That might be all of the charts. It might be just one or two that you have on your dashboard. But if you don't do that, it's only going to control the first one on your dashboard. Now I'm going to get rid of these because they look hideous because I haven't been able to remove that background fill. Hopefully you get the idea though. And let's see, what's the time? We're slightly over the very, very last point, which is a very important point, updating your dashboard. So if we go back to our sales data, you can see I've got an extra data tab down here. So if this is, let's say this is the next year's sales, what I can do is select the data, Control A, Control C to copy, and I'm going to paste it onto the bottom of the data in the sales data tab. Now let's make sure that we're all the way across. We are. Control V to paste in, and I'm just going to delete out the heading. And if you've got your data in a table, you should find that it is going to update automatically. Now, did I not put this one in a table? I don't think I did I? Sorry. I'm going to put it back in a table. If you've done that before, when you paste in new data, it's going to automatically add on to the bottom. So tables auto expand to accommodate whatever you add. So now, if we have it in a table, if we want to update our dashboard, we can simply go back to here and then we just need to refresh it. So if we go to Pivot Chart Analyze, we've got a refresh button in the middle, and I think we should see something like number of cancelled orders should change. Let's go to Refresh All. No, because I did it the wrong way round. Oh, God, it's a bit of a disaster at the end, guys. The problem that I'm having is that I think I got confused when I was showing you the completed spreadsheet. I already put that one in a table. When I came to the workbook, I didn't actually put it in a table, and I forgot to do that right at the beginning, which is a very big error. What should happen is if you have your data in a table, when you build your dashboard, if you add data into the bottom, the dashboard can be updated simply by clicking on refresh, and everything will pull through nicely. I haven't done that, so it's not updating. So I can't have that wow moment at the end where everything all updates nicely. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully you get the idea. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope you all learn at least one thing that you think is going to help you. Have a great night, a great afternoon, a great morning, wherever you are, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.